Welcome to today's CIO Watercooler TV episode. My name's David Savage and I'm your host for today, and I'm joined by JC. Good afternoon, thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Good afternoon, thanks David. Thanks to the CIO Watercooler for having me on the interview series.
Yeah, no, look, it's a pleasure to have you here. You're the Managing Director of Corix Partners and you've been involved in cybersecurity for around 20 years now.
That's right, yes. I came to live in and work in the UK in the early 1990s. Started my career in IT. In project management and solutions architecture, really. And then I gradually got more and more involved with technical security from the late 90s. Yep. Early days of the internet, first firewalls, first antivirus.
Was that by design or accident?
And it's just the way things happened, really. Yeah. Somebody needed to do it. I mean, it was my background. I've got a degree in telecoms engineering, so it was a fairly natural thing to do. And then one thing followed another, really. I became the Chief Information Security Officer for the international division of the Dutch financial institution Rabobank in 2000. And I held that job until 2009, which is roughly the point where I created what eventually became Corix Partners, which you've mentioned, which is now a boutique management consulting firm assisting CIOs and board-level execs with cybersecurity strategy, organization, and governance challenges. So yes, I've been involved in cybersecurity for over 20 years overall.
So that's an interesting point that you mentioned there, because the evolution of cybersecurity in the industry it feels like it's been accelerated certainly in the last 10 years. If I think about the way that cybersecurity has gone from this thing that's a bit of a hot potato, maybe picked up by one or two people who have the bandwidth to deal with it within some organizations, to now being something that appears like it's maturing, but you there say that you advise CIOs and boards on the role of governance and cybersecurity, which suggests that there are still a lot of organizations out there that do need help in this area.
Definitely. It's amazing how it has evolved over the last 20 years. First of all, when I became a CISO 20 years ago, we were not talking about cybersecurity. We were talking about information security. Yep. Cybersecurity, those terms have appeared effectively 5, 6, 7 years ago. Okay? If I look back 20 years ago when I became a CISO for the first time, the main drivers were all around risk and compliance. Okay? Information security was essentially a balancing act between risk appetite, compliance requirement, and costs. Okay? And the CISO was essentially a risk manager in a context where operational risk practices were still in the process of structuring themselves. And that trend, the trend of having risk and compliance as the main drivers behind information security, for me dominates the first decade of the century, roughly up to the financial crisis. Since the financial crisis of the last 10 years, what we have seen is totally different. Totally different. Of course, against the backdrop of a financial crisis of historical proportion, we have seen an unprecedented amount of technological change, which has literally revolutionized many industries and society at large. The cloud, the more and more versatile, more and more powerful mobile devices, a variety of emerging technologies around data in particular, which really have powered the digital transformation of many industries and society. All those things, from a cybersecurity perspective, have introduced more and more attack surfaces. And we have seen a non-stop stream of cyber attacks, of data breaches. And behind that, a greater and greater amount of interest from the media, from politicians, from regulators. And all that has created a context, really, for many organizations to start realizing that all this is real. Okay? This is not about risk or compliance. This is not just about risk or compliance. Risk is about uncertainty, things which may or may not happen. Okay? Compliance, for many people, is a race to the bottom. Okay? It's about doing a bare minimum and put the right ticks in the right boxes. But many organizations over the past 10 years have realized that those threats are real, that they can target your business, that they do target your business, that they cause harm, and that sense of reality really, to me, dominates the last decade.
Sorry, so just to jump in and pick up on a point that you're saying, you've mentioned there about the broadening of attack surfaces, and I guess if you think about IoT and manufacturing and warehouses where you have autonomous machines that are connected to the internet, that is growing exponentially. are the actors that are potentially attacking organizations targeting those organizations specifically, or is it an increase in opportunistic attacks from various different players now able to try and exploit any weaknesses in an organization?
Attacks are more and more targeted.
Yeah.
There is absolutely no doubt about that. Attacks are more and more targeted, and and the examples you're mentioning here, the IoT in particular, is absolutely 100% part of what I was talking about in terms of the increase of the number of attack surfaces and the impact it has had on the perception many industries have of the cyber threats. They're real. They can target you. They can cause you harm. They will cause you harm. I mean, many organizations, in many boardrooms, you know, we are reaching the point where it's very much the when, not if paradigm which dominates. You know, the fact that this is just a matter of time. You will be breached. Okay? And that changes completely the dynamics around security. All of a sudden, this is not about risk, something which may or may not happen. This is about reality, and this is about certainty, not uncertainty. And it drives a completely different approach to cybersecurity and a completely different mindset at board level.
Now, you mentioned the boardroom there. If there is that, it's not if, but when. How is that altering the relationship, I suppose, between the CISO, the CIO, and even possibly the CEO, who may not like that message being carried to them?
Well, it puts the CIO and the CISO under tremendous pressure, because in many cases, in many organizations where we are seeing low maturity levels, low cybersecurity maturity levels, we are also seeing very often very large transformative programs of change being driven from the board down. And it creates a tremendous amount of pressure for the CISOs, because now they really have to deliver. And that, to me, is the real challenge the industry has looking towards the next decade. The security industry has had the tendency for a very long time to talk about things which could go wrong and not enough about how to fix things. Okay? Now CIOs and CISOs in many organizations are under pressure to deliver very large-scale transformative programs of change, under the scrutiny of the board, very often under the scrutiny of regulators as well, regulators which now have the power to impose business-threatening fines if personal data is involved under the GDPR and going forward under a number of variety of regulations going around the world.
Look, it's a fascinating area, and I know we've only got a short period of time to scratch the surface on it, but I really do appreciate you coming in and sharing some of those thoughts with us. And hopefully these CIOs watching will take something away from that perspective that you bring to it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If this has been interesting and you'd like to access more content, have a look at the links below.